And genetic modelling suggests that as little as 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, there was an individual who was a common ancestor to every human being alive today, someone who connects us all. This enmeshing will continue into the future too.
Watch more stories like this at bbc.com/real.
I'm heading north towards the Arctic Circle to find out if emotional intelligence is common to Scandinavian royals. Is it perhaps the key to their popularity?
The Danish royal family stays popular by being at one with the people, by being accessible and kind of normal. From everything I've read about the Norwegian royal family, their popularity stems from their tolerance. They are incredibly liberal. And the most remarkable thing about it is this is all driven, it seems, by the king, who is 86 years old and gives speeches in favour of gay rights and refugees and racial tolerance, and just seems so of the 21st century. And I'm really interested to see if that's what makes them such successful monarchs.
Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. World Business Report.
The US Treasury Secretary warns of economic and financial catastrophe if lawmakers don't raise the debt ceiling. And China talks trade with the Taliban in a bid to bring Afghanistan into its Belt and Road investment project. And we'll speak to the founder of Bluetooth, 20 years on from its creation. Hello to you, a very warm welcome. This is World Business Report. I'm Ben Thompson. Now we're going to start in the United States, where the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has been speaking. She sounded a stark warning over the country's debt ceiling. That, of course, is the amount of money that the United States government is allowed to borrow to pay for pretty much everything that they do. Well, without an agreement to increase what the federal government can spend and borrow, it could run out of money by early June. Well, at that point, the federal government might not be able to make wage, welfare and other payments. So let's get the thoughts of Michelle Fleury, who's watching this for us from New York. And Michelle, we've been here before, haven't we? But once again, a stark warning that if nothing is done, it causes huge repercussions, not just in the US, but around the world.
Yeah, this is because, as you say, it's going to affect the job certainty of government employees and others here in the United States. It will have a knock-on effect on the broader economy. But then there is, beyond the shores of the United States, the kind of ricochets that it will have around the global financial system. And that's why you've had this kind of increasing drumbeat as we get closer to the kind of point at which Treasury runs out of money, of warnings, and the latest of which, and perhaps the starkest so far, came from the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Sunday, when she said that failure to raise the debt ceiling would cause a steep economic downturn. She talked of chaos, financial chaos, and she appeared on this US TV station over the weekend to try and say that the department would run out of measures to pay its debt obligations by June. That's the so-called X date, and that only a deal with Congress could avoid potential economic chaos. Have a listen to her remarks.
It's Congress's job to do this. If they fail to do it, we will have an economic and financial catastrophe that will be of our own making. And there is no action that President Biden and the U.S. Treasury can take to prevent that catastrophe.
So the words there of Janet Yellen. And Michelle, I wonder what is more damaging, sort of the short-term repercussions of not being able to do a deal and therefore not being able to pay for all sorts of things in the US economy, or the longer-term implications of sort of America's financial fiscal responsibility, just raising the debt limit once again.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're talking there about obviously all the kind of payments that the US government makes. Included among that is interest payments on debts, one of its big debt holders, China, amongst many of the foreign investors who hold US Treasury bonds, traditionally seen as kind of, the safest out there in the world. That's why it has such a high rating, because people don't expect the US government to default. But I think people are looking at this and saying, perhaps it's different. You've got this high-stakes meeting between the White House, President Biden, and the leadership of both parties in Congress and Senate, and the sides remain very far apart. And so it's different than 10 years ago, in part because there is no common ground, but in part because Wall Street and investors have shown they have less tolerance for this. If you look at what happened in the UK with Liz Truss, when she unveiled her fiscal plan, the sharp reaction you saw from markets, that forced her essentially out of office and she had to climb down from those plans. There is a situation here where you could see a very volatile reaction from global financial markets. And that's why people say this is not just an issue for the US, but potentially globally. The repercussions, we don't quite know. And what's different now than 10 years ago is you've got higher interest rates and you've got higher inflation. So the potential for an accident without pressure on these two sides to come together and find a political solution, I think people are all looking at this quite nervously.
Yes, absolutely, Michelle. Thank you. Sorry if I can speak. Michelle Fleury there, live in New York. Now elsewhere, Britain's investment minister has arrived in Hong Kong, the visit designed to promote business ties with the city. Lord Dominic Johnson is the first British minister to visit Hong Kong for 5 years before mass pro-democracy protests swept the city and resulted in a crackdown by Beijing. Well, our Asia business correspondent Nick Marsh has the details.
Dominic Johnson's in Hong Kong to do business. He's there to attract investment in the UK. There's a focus primarily on financial services and financial technologies. Now, the economic links between the home of Europe's financial capital and Asia's financial capital, well, of course, they run deep. But there are some parallels more recently as well. Both places, frankly speaking, have had a bit of a wobble recently. London because of Brexit and the uncertainty there, Hong Kong because of the political turmoil, the protests, and then more recently the COVID-19 restrictions. So from an economic standpoint, this visit makes sense. Hong Kong finance officials were in London last month doing similar meetings with UK ministers. But of course, it's the political backdrop to all of this that makes it so contentious. Rewind 3 or 4 years during the protests in 2019, Britain was a vocal supporter of the demonstrators. It was highly critical of China, its crackdown, the national security law, then jumped forward here in 2023 and it's back in Hong Kong asking for investment. So a reflection of economic reality perhaps, and certainly a reflection of the UK government's softening stance towards China, which is all about trying to engage Beijing rather than isolate it.
Nick Marsh there with the details. Elsewhere, the Taliban has come to an agreement with China and Pakistan to extend the Belt and Road Infrastructure project to Afghanistan. That deal could mean that billions of dollars could stream into the sanctions-hit country, all designed to fund investment. Well, those talks took place on Saturday in Pakistan. Our Asia business reporter, João da Silva, can explain what those talks involved.
Well, Sally, these trilateral talks between China, Pakistan and Afghanistan have turned into a real diplomatic coup for the Taliban. We're talking about infrastructure investment potentially worth billions of dollars, and that in a country that has been internationally isolated and facing a terrible economic and humanitarian crisis. Now, China has long been investing in Pakistan. We're talking about billions of dollars in networks of roads, ports and railways under this plan called the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a plan under the wider China Belt and Road Initiative. And now they've agreed to extend this plan to Afghanistan. Now, the Taliban, of course, very much welcome this. A reminder that in 2021, after the Taliban takeover, the US froze billions of dollars in Afghan assets, which to prevent those funds to be used in terror activities. Other countries have also cut ties with Afghanistan because of the Taliban's treatment of women and girls, for example. So it's only natural that this isolated cash-strapped regime is very keen to secure these sort of deals. They've been promoting Chinese investment in Afghanistan's natural resources. The country's mineral reserves are said to be worth $1 trillion, and China has taken steps in that direction. Just recently, we saw a deal by a subsidiary of the state-owned China Petroleum Corporation to drill for oil in the country. But for Pakistan and for China, this is about more than just business interests. Maintaining good ties with the Taliban is seen as sort of a national security interest. They know that terror groups operate within Afghanistan, and they've caused violence within their own borders. So for them, investing in Afghanistan is ultimately investing in peace and stability in the region.
Jada Silva there in our Asia Business Hub in Singapore. Now, whether it is headphones or keyboards, speakers or printers, we take this thing, Bluetooth, for granted. But this month marks the 25th anniversary of the launch of the pairing technology. It was originally produced by Ericsson, and then the technology was later shared with other firms designed to encourage take-up. Well, according to the founder of the Bluetooth business, 5 billion Bluetooth-enabled devices are produced every single year. So let's speak to that founder. His name is Arian Johansson, and he runs a sports video company called Speedio. But back in 1998, he signed up 2,000 businesses to that new startup technology. It's good to have you with us on the programme. And tell me a little bit about how you came up with that idea, not only generating the technology in the first place, but the idea was that you would sell it with, you would give it, I should say, to all those other companies designed to encourage more people to use it.
Correct. Nice to be on. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a technology that we needed to find other partners, especially on the computer side and on other competitor side on the mobile phone. So we teamed up with Intel and Nokia quite early because we saw that it was no use having the technology on our own at Ericsson. So what we did, we founded a peace treatment. Actually, it was whatever you put into the to this contract, you gave away your patents, but you could also retrieve everything that was within. So Bluetooth is actually a big peace treaty with today almost 40,000 companies.
And how difficult was it for you to convince maybe other members of the business, other members of your team, that you were just going to give away this technology?
Yeah, if you didn't give away the technology, you didn't have the partners. That was as simple. And if we won, on the other hand, we were ahead with our technology. We didn't have to develop our technology again. And of course, the technology was good for the product companies. We could sell more products and more advanced products. And there was new categories of products that emerged as soon as we have this standard.
I said in the introduction, we now take it for granted, that invention that is 25 years old this month. Talk to me a little bit about the changes since then. What you invented 25 years ago, how has it changed in the interim?
Yeah, the founding part is really still there. That is to connect to between devices and ask, what can you do, and so on and so forth. But a lot of things has happened. It's gone from 10 meters to 60 meters. Now we're talking 240 meters. We're talking about higher speeds. But the main and most important one is that price or cost has gone down tremendously. So it doesn't almost cost anything to produce a Bluetooth device. And the second one, which is very, very important, is that the power consumption is very, very low. So you can have it in watches and headphones for an entire day and so on and so on. So power consumption, I think, is the most important thing that has happened.
Erin, it's a delight to talk to you. I should say happy birthday as well to that invention, 25 years old this month. Thank you for being with us.
We will party like we did back in the day, so that's great.
Glad to hear it. Really good to see you. Thanks very much. More on all those stories on the BBC website, bbc.com/business. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
The news never sleeps.